Good to see you. How are you doing?
Good to see you too. Thank you for inviting me. Good. I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Could you do me a little honor and introduce yourself shortly?
Of course. My name is Simone Moissidis, and I work in leadership consultancy. I take teams into the mountains often to make them reflect on what makes them tick and what doesn't make them tick and why they do what they do. I'm 33 years old. I work for a company called the Transformatie Groep.
Mm-hmm.
And apart from that, I am very much into female leadership or women leadership, which I will hopefully tell you more about.
Sounds good. Female leadership, what does that mean exactly? I know it's a broad question, but what does that encompass?
Yeah, it's a super broad question, but an accurate one. Well, maybe I should start with saying that already this title isn't completely correct. Women leadership, because what does it mean basically? What does leadership mean in the first place, right? Aren't we all leaders? I use leadership to indicate the top management of companies. Women leadership stands for basically the representation of women in top management, but apart from that also for some feminine characteristics in business. And I guess this whole movement towards more women comes with certain qualities that might need some revalidation.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's like I said, it was a broad question. So you heard the podcast that I did with Ruben
Yes.
Trulli, which was actually the last episode that I did.
Yes.
We were talking about having an unbiased conversation with people and getting to know them, making sure that we understand who people are without actually seeing them. I think that's the tool that he's building, right? Or that he's built.
Yes.
To make sure that we can start understanding other people and get their viewpoint without being biased and talking to the person face to face. That's how we met. We had a conversation about the work that he does and the contact that he had with you. And then you told me about female leadership. And that made me think, how does female leadership change in this day and age? Because there's so much to do with the change of leadership, technology taking place. We need a different structure in companies, different viewpoints, different voices. How is that changing at this moment in your perspective?
I think more than ever this is becoming a very interesting topic, because in general, how will leadership be affected by technology, right? So what we see is then that certain tasks at some point will be taken over by technology, and I think we totally underestimate how many tasks that includes, but that's for later. And when we talk about women in leadership, I think it has been already proven several times that the more diversity a company has and the more diverse a management team is, the better the collective result is.
For sure, yeah.
The better the outcome is. So unfortunately, and I see it in my work supporting these teams, the majority is still very masculine and very male-dominated. I would say white male-dominated. And in order to create diversity, you need at least a minority of 33% to actually be heard, to actually have a voice. So that doesn't go just for women, but also for all other sorts of minorities. That as soon as they reach these 33%, they finally get a voice. So sometimes I meet teams, they say, well, we have one woman in in our management team, and the other 7 are male. So we hit the quota, but that's not real diversity. And this will get more and more important because we need different perspectives. Why do we need them? It's basically to avoid blind spots. And that is, I think, the issue in this time, that we see, for example, extreme right governments or pretty outspoken political changes, where some nuance would be very welcome.
Right.
And I think that is mostly why it is so important to have more diversity in a company.
Right. And it could be a difficult question to answer, but is diversity something that you can steer towards, or is it something that should be adopted inside a culture?
Yeah, the latter, for sure,
Hmm.
for sure. Because it's, I guess everybody now understands, right? Everybody knows we have to do something about it. It's out there. Basically, if you're still not dealing with diversity, you really missed the boat.
Yeah.
So I guess but adapting it into your culture is really next level.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing is indeed hitting the quota and saying, okay, we have enough women. And the second thing is making sure that their voice is being listened to,
Right.
which is more of a cultural thing. And the same goes for different cultural backgrounds. And yeah, basically, if something exists on paper, it still needs to, be shown in reality
Right.
that it actually works. And that's why it's great to start with the top management, because as soon as they start showing certain behavior, you hope they become examples for the layer below.
Right. But how do you change that in companies where that's not the standard?
Yes, it's a very good question, and it's actually it's a challenge.
Mhm.
And there are still many companies where this is an issue, and it's such an issue that it's such a blind spot. Actually, it's a blind spot, and that's what makes it harder. So I guess it starts with being curious and being open to change, and that's the first step. And at the same time, it's a super difficult step.
Right.
Because it requires some sort of self-reflection. So I would say if you are a leader in one of these organizations, ask yourself, like, how many friends do you have that come from a certain similar background,
Yeah.
or had the same education as you, and with whom you communicate super easily. And ask yourself how many people you have from totally different backgrounds in your near environment, and you'll be shocked. Because I'm pretty sure that the majority of us will say, okay, most of the people around me come from a similar background.
Right.
Which means that there's still so much left to discover. But it's a challenge, and I see that they handle it in totally different ways. So I have good examples, I have bad examples. But the willingness has to be there. I guess at some point there has to be a desire, but also a sort of pain,
Right.
in order to really make something urgent enough to change it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it starts with ourselves. So,
And you said urgency. Is there a certain, and I don't want to make this something that only should have a financial benefit, but is there like an incentive to make that change, especially for organizations that are stuck in the 60s and 70s, so to say?
Well, there is, because we've already seen that the financial outcome in the end, the result, is better. There are also all these theories about if the financial crisis from 10 years ago, longer ago actually, could have been prevented if there were more women working in finance. Well, I don't want to go so far, but I do believe that it does increase the result. It not only increases the result, it increases the employee satisfaction. It totally changes the culture into, I would say, a working culture that is more attractive, especially to millennials and Gen Z, the generation after us. So for me, it's almost I find it hard to still discuss this. It's so clear that this needs to change that, I'm shocked that it still happens. But it's definitely still happening.
It should be a no-brainer, right?
It should be a no-brainer, and it should be... I guess what I still see is that we try to make people fit into a certain structure. Instead of turning this around and looking at the people and say, okay, what kind of people do we want to have here? And let's change our structure.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I come from this experience, right? I come from a major corporation. And I think the problem with this is that they didn't see the incentive. And I mean the incentive as in an enriched culture. And the thing that they did is in the top management, C-suite, was just the 7 Marks Peters, like they say here. So the white male-dominated C-suite. And they said we need diversity, which means they needed both female leadership, but also leadership, but they also needed a different culture, so to say. But the thing is, they decided where that cap was. So they said, okay, we can have diversity in middle management, we can have diversity in top management, but it always stopped into making the transition into C-suite. So it was always still the same old group of guys, so to say, that was at the top level making the big decisions. And I think that that's more of a question, I think. Is it so that you need to change the entire top layer culture to make sure that it trickles down into the organization? Is that how a culture change should happen in that case?
Actually, I think you could argue that both bottom-up and top-down cultural transitions should take place.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that if the top of the company doesn't change, it will affect the rest of the company.
Right.
So if indeed the top layer is not inspirational, has, for example, no women, which makes which only, I would say, stimulates this lack of female or women examples.
Mm-hmm.
I think then you will have an issue in the rest of your organization. And I have to say, sometimes I speak to people and they say, well, we have an issue, our revenue is not growing, we are stuck, we just implemented this new strategy. And that's usually when I tend to look at the culture, because that means that there is something else going on, which indeed might be on the bottom-up level.
Right.
So employees who are not happy. But I think it's very important that, especially on the decision-making positions, there is a diverse group of representatives, basically,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what you are as a leader. And I think sometimes people underestimate that, because if you look at the growth path of I would say a general manager in any company, you see that somebody is super specialized in one topic and
right.
is extremely good at that, right? So he gets a promotion. At some point he turns into a manager.
Mm-hmm.
But being a manager and having to deal with people is a completely different skill than the specific specialism he was hired for and where he is really good at it.
For sure, yeah.
So if this person, manages to get all the way to the top, you still he or she still needs support on how to deal with people.
Right.
And I guess that's why humanizing business life, I think, for me, is such a beautiful purpose, because it's definitely something that needs more attention.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have men and women doing this, you already manage to reach a way bigger scope of people in your company.
Right. Yeah, because I think an organization, a culture, should also reflect the outside world, right? And the outside world isn't just male dominated, right? It's a combination of the both female leadership and male leadership, different cultures. So I think an organization should reflect the outside world, right? But how do you bring the outside world inside? Because like you just said, I think you said it in the beginning, you have usually a group of friends or acquaintances that kind of look like you. You look at people that resemble yourself. That's also the biggest bias for recruiters, right? They tend to hire people that look like them. How do you switch that off? Because there's multiple layers inside an organization, and if you want to diversify, but you still have recruiters picking people that look like them, where do you start?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest question of all. Speaking from own experience, I once started as a recruiter, so I really am very well aware of this bias. But what I can say is that there are right now so many tools to bypass this bias.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen some super inspirational examples. I think one of them, I would definitely say the most inspiring one, was Arcadis, the engineering company, where, for example, they have a pretty advanced tool. It's almost like a video game, where you are basically being interviewed, and I think you're wearing some sort of VR glasses, but during the interview your hands change from being white male to being a woman, and and all sorts of different options, and to actually make you feel what happens when you receive different questions.
Oh, wow.
So all of a sudden you get questions about, so what does your husband do, and how do you manage things at home, and of course we all understand these things, and I think we have by now seen enough commercials about them, but there are tools that actually make you go through this experience yourself, and the results are super good. So I think there are ways, and I think there is that could be a nice task for technology and AI, of course, depending on the algorithms and who makes them,
right.
who writes them. But I think that's a super interesting one. I think we will never completely be free from biases, at least humans, and by the technology. But I think that's an extra reason for us to do some more self-reflection. You can even do some tests to see where your biases are exactly, and be aware of them.
Right.
And be aware of them, because in general, that's true. It's the mirror effect, right? We like to be with and hire people who are like us. It definitely results in quick decision making and moving fast forward, but with a big risk of having blind spots and not thinking of things that other people would have thought of. Yeah,
makes sense. Actually, I do have a bias. I'm aware of the bias.
Good.
Let me explain how. In 2020, I entered a hackathon. Actually, I was supposed to speak at the hackathon, but because it was COVID, they decided to move from a live location to a online event. So the speaking slot, they turned it into, I think it was just a different way of fitting in the program. So the speaker slot didn't fall towards me, which meant that I hadn't really gotten a role within the hackathon. I got called by the organization and they said, instead of a speaker, would you like to be one of the contestants? I said, oh yeah, sure. And the topic was anti-discrimination in recruitment algorithms. That was the main topic. Focused towards sexism. That was the main topic to handle. And before we started, we had to do one of those bias tests. I did one, and my bias was towards female leadership within technology. And so we went into that conversation because I wanted to know where that came from. Because I had a team, I think it was like, I was the only guy in that team. There was five people in the team. And I thought, well, I do trust these people. So where does my bias come from? Because two of them were data experts, data analytics. They were super smart. So I thought I have a bias against them, but I fully trust them. How does that work? So I went into a conversation, one of the psychologists that they had there, and we dove into my past. And I did I did the IT school of management like years and years ago. Yeah. It was a group of 30 people, 29 guys and 1 girl back then. So my bias came from the fact that I was raised in a technical environment, so with a lot of people who were into technology, and there was just one girl basically, because we were so young, in that group. Yeah. So my bias was basically born from the fact that I thought they're not interested, and they probably didn't pass the exam to get here. But that was just a bias that I had because I grew up with that idea. And so the psychologist said that I grew past that bias, but it's still somewhat inside. Because the test was doing a couple of questions quickly, right? Like one of the questions was, if I want to hire a technician, I'll call, and then they had 2 names, like a typical girl's name and a typical boy's name. So I kind of fell into my own bias. And he said, well, you bypass your bias on a day-to-day basis because you are aware of your bias, but it's still there because you grew up with it. The good side is, he said, everyone has a bias. It's okay, as long as you are aware of what it is and you can turn it off. And it turned out that we had a good group because we won the hackathon. So I kind of disproved my bias again. But again, they said, rest assured, everyone has a bias. But the thing is, you need to be aware of that bias, and in case you want to turn it off. Then a couple of years later, we had a couple of students from the Erasmus University working on a technical solution. It was a female leadership group because that was their specific niche. They were perfect. So again, the bias was bypassed. But they didn't get an opportunity in the workforce because again, they ran into the same bias that most recruiters have. What we found out, because you said maybe technology can help, the reason why we won the hackathon is because we said, don't use technology on this. Because humans have a bias. It's a common thing. It's part of what makes us human. But technology only reinforces that bias. And then you can no longer turn it off. Because if you, and we wanted to make it as clear as possible. We wanted to open the black box. We wanted to have recruitment like as most transparency as you could get. But the problem is whatever bias someone has, technology is gonna like tenfold it. So it's gonna come out even harder. So we decided that it was best to train people, have them aware of their own bias so they could bypass it. You still need the right people to do so, of course, but make sure that they know what their bias is, bypass it, and then make the right decisions when hiring people. Because if you use technology, it's only gonna make it stronger. So we recommended don't use technology when doing recruitment.
It makes sense. It's a pity, but it makes sense. Yes, in the end, it's still made by humans.
Yeah.
And then being reinforced by technology. So I guess the thing we can do is train people indeed in their biases.
Yeah.
And that can be done through workshops, can be done through indeed certain tests or tools. But it definitely starts with being open to it. And that's, I think, that's most important. And I can totally imagine that there are management teams where they say, oh, another thing we have to do and another thing we have to think of while structuring our company or to keep our employees satisfied. But it's way more important than we think.
It is.
It shows our blind spots. I can imagine that this one person who is totally different than you comes with annoying questions and you're like, oh, I just want to move on.
Yeah.
And we all know where we're heading to, so stop with these annoying questions. But sometimes you need to have this person to actually reflect on things you've never reflected on.
Yeah, it's a crucial part of doing business.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it leads to better decision making.
It does.
Yes.
But how do you see technology step into this? Because you already said that there's now like the what was it called, gamification on this. So making sure that people start understanding other people as well and literally step into their shoes. Is there any other way that technology could help us in this?
Well, I mean, if I refer a little bit to what you discussed with Ruben in the previous podcast, I think technology helps to anonymize things.
Mm-hmm.
And if you use that with a big group of people, you make sure that not just biases, but also issues like hierarchy are no longer an issue.
Right.
So I think technology there could be important. I still have clients, often partner structures, for example, big law firms, where the hierarchy is pretty strong and where someone who works as an intern would never say something if he knows he's in the same room as a senior partner. We still all say that we start to say that hierarchy is less important, and especially in the Netherlands we try to have a more equal and balanced structure even in companies, but I think it's an illusion to say that the hierarchy doesn't exist. And I think technology there can help a lot. So if you would ask this intern for his opinion and then again the senior partner for his opinion, they might be more similar if you put them in the same room. But if you manage to use technology and make them answer that question online, you make sure you really get the real answer. And if you then can combine these two by putting them in a chat box where they don't know the identity of the other person, I think that leads to super interesting information. And then it's up to people like me and my colleagues to facilitate the good conversation and go deeper in that, because in the end you need some vulnerability to get there. But I think to like surpass the first hurdle of having to really give your opinion and speak out your thoughts, technology can help.
Because one of the objections that we got was basically against being anonymous.
Okay.
For whoever's listening, check out Ruben, the podcast with Ruben, to understand what the technology does. But in short, he made sure that people could talk to each other without being physically face to face, so that they could understand each other's viewpoint, right? And it started from, I think, voting to see what the left and right side had in common and where their biases were. I think that works if it's on a conversational level. What we found out in the hackathon is that if you anonymize people, you strip them away from their identity, and most people hate that. The example that we gave was that we figured out during the hackathon that you need humans in the loop at least, and that technology is only going to enforce the bias. So one of the solutions that we had was, why don't we make it anonymous so that people can show what they can do rather than who they are and what they look like, because that's where most biases come from.
Yes.
So basically prove yourself, because you wouldn't get the opportunity if you would send in your picture and say what your name is, right? Because that's what usually happens. So we talked to a lot of people, and especially people who were not from my culture and my background, because that idea came from us. They said, well, one said the fact that I'm from Morocco is usually one of the reasons that they don't even invite me for because they see my surname and they're like, okay, we're not going to do this. And they give you a lame excuse, like, we've already found the right fit or whatever. And he said, why should I hide my identity to make sure that I can get a seat at their table? Because if they're like this, I don't even want to sit at their table. So in that case, being anonymous really did them a disservice, because we said, well, you can go into this process, but don't tell who you are. That's not the right way to go about it. But I think if you can open up a conversation with someone without them knowing who you are, and then step into like the next step being, getting acquainted, I think that would be a good step.
Yes, I see your point, and I think it's totally correct that you need to at some point have the conversation. And thank God, otherwise I wouldn't have a job.
Right.
But this is really, in the end, you need to get there, but it requires quite some vulnerability.
Right.
And I would say some courage, especially in an hierarchical environment, to do that. And I can imagine, because I've been in their shoes, that sometimes you think, do I prefer losing my career on this matter to have this conversation with my boss? And I think many people experience that. So I totally agree with you that in the end, it's the conversation where indeed the real opinions come forward. And it's just a tool to make it more accessible to get there.
Right.
That's but I totally agree with you with on the identity matter.
And you did a lot of research also recently. I'm just going to test your knowledge right now, because I want to challenge you, because the conversation that we had. What was the most shocking thing that you discovered? And do you have any facts or numbers on that?
Yeah. Well, basically 2 years ago, I'll give a bit of background first on the research. 2 years ago, I started doing a bit of research on this women topic. I was reading a report from McKinsey that stated that in the Netherlands only 4.4% of Dutch CEOs was women. And that shocked me. I mean, in the end, I work a lot on C-level management teams, so I had seen this, but that in the Netherlands, a country which we call still pretty advanced to compare to other countries, that the number was so small, really shocked me. And that was basically the catalyst of this research. And of course, in that I also bring in my own experience. I started as a recruiter, and then I worked a few years at ABN AMRO, and I ended up working in a super masculine environment, where often I was indeed the only woman. And so that research included a lot of desk search, these kind of reports, statistics, what are the numbers, when do women actually fall out on their career ladder, and also interviewing women in top management positions. I didn't stick to just C-level or the CEOs, I just made it a bit broader to C-level and then top management. Otherwise I wouldn't have enough basically for the research. And in the end, I ended up interviewing 40 women in the Netherlands, all in top positions. And I would say altogether the most fascinating thing. Well, one thing that was absolutely fascinating for me was the fact that we often speak about the glass ceiling, right? So we think that women have equal chances up until pretty high level,
Okay.
close to top management. Turns out women have an issue much sooner. So we call it the broken rung.
Okay.
So basically in the step towards the first management level, that's where they often get bypassed by their male peers.
Mm-hmm.
So basically by missing that rung, they have an issue for the rest of their career to actually get to the level that their peers have.
Wow. Okay.
Of course, once you get on the level, there's also a glass ceiling there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we don't recognize that the issue starts way earlier. So first management position means, I don't know, I think you are around 30 to 40, let's make it a broad range,
Right.
where this happens for the first time.
Wow.
And that was already a super, I would say, shocking result that I got from there. And if I look at then the results that I got from women who shared their story with me, these 40 women, I would say what really surprised me was the fact that they always during their career got the feedback that they were less visible than their male peers.
I'm sorry, that's a recognition there. Yeah.
That's interesting, right?
Mm. Yeah, it's that really rubs me the wrong way. My wife came home from her previous job.
Mm-hmm.
That was the feedback that she always got in meetings.
She was not visible.
Yeah, like, well, you need to speak up. And she's like, well, if I agree with the group, then what do you want me to say? Like, do you want me to repeat what everyone else said? That really rubs me the wrong way, those kind of,
Well, and that is super interesting because there I think you see indeed our unconscious biases that apparently we are almost trained to see and hear men more easily than women.
Yeah.
So if the woman doesn't say anything, we don't see her.
Yep.
But it raised the question, like what is being visible? So I asked them this: is it like literally indeed being more loud in meetings?
Mm-hmm.
Does it mean speaking up? Does it mean going to after work drinks, showing your face there?
Yep.
Does it mean not working from home but indeed being in the office most of the days? What does this visibility really mean? And that's actually the moment where I realized, okay, apart from turning this into an interesting paper or talking about it in podcast, we need to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've decided to make a program specifically for women who are in, I would say, in this age level between 35 and 45, I would say, who encounter these issues and these fake feedback comments like you're not visible enough. To train them in not just making themselves more visible, but making them who they are. So I'm not making them into anything, but of course helping them to get closer to who they are. And that has to do with female characteristics or feminine characteristics and masculine characteristics. Yes, this visibility thing is an issue. I've had it a few times as well that my bosses told me, like, you need to work on your visibility. And it's like, what does that mean?
Does it mean? Do you want me to wear a red jacket or what is visibility?
Yeah.
But do you also, I'm trying to be like the devil's advocate here, but do you also train or at least talk to the other side? As in, if you give this as feedback, be clear what you mean.
Yes. Very good question. In the end, I really believe in allyship. So I can train women as much as I want, but this is not a women problem.
Exactly.
And that's often how it's posed. So I think it starts with actually showing both men and women their blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
And in case of men, I think their blind spots have to do something with this topic.
Right.
So I would say ideal tip for organizations is create like not an allyship maybe, but like a buddy system where for a week you put a man and a woman together and you basically ask them to coach each other. So that after every meeting, the woman can ask the man, hey, how would you have done this?
Right.
Or what was your perspective? And that's how you learn from each other. So I guess it helps to get this blind spot away and it helps to get men more... more aware of their biases. I don't believe that it's not because I don't believe that they don't. It's not that they don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a matter of a blind spot.
Right.
You really don't see it. If you have never experienced how it is to get constantly comments about what you're wearing and how your situation at home is, you don't really realize what that does.
Right.
that you don't feel taken serious as a professional.
Yeah, I have no idea, to be honest. Because no, but it
Shall
never.
I ask you some
Yeah,
questions?
all right, please. No, but it makes a lot of sense because I have never been in that situation before. So yeah, it is good to train people on a blind spot. I think it is actually a blind spot. But I think, and that's the problem that I have with this, is that it often feels that if you get the comment, you need to be more visible. Then we as a whole often look at indeed like the women like, okay, so you need to work on your visibility. No. That person who said that, the one that gave the feedback, needs to work on the way he or she gives feedback, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I understand that it's usually switched around.
But I guess that curiosity and just asking questions, even in this case, like, what do you mean exactly with that? Can already help a lot. And often we are, I mean, that's also the part where you get emotions in, right?
Right.
I probably feel offended or something when you tell me something like that. Or I will honestly don't know what you mean. Should I start posting things on LinkedIn every day? So it requires to actually actively listen with an open mind and to be generally curious. But of course in a constructive way.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we can help people to, help them build a trusted and safe environment, first of all, because without that, the rest is basically...
Makes no sense, for sure.
I mean, if that layer is not there, it doesn't, even giving feedback doesn't work if there's no trust and safety. So first building this trust and safety, then starting to support them in giving and receiving feedback. I have to say, I still... like even language-wise, I'm thinking now of an example of where still I would say once per year during my evaluation I get often compared to football players. I have no idea what it means.
But why?
I don't know. Apparently I work like Messi. I don't know.
That's a compliment though, but but still.
No, but just to give you an example, so even these things, I'm wondering like if I would, if I was like managing a team and I would tell my team, I can compare your work to, I don't know, my Gucci bag and my Prada bag.
Yeah, okay.
So it's in these little things where, I mean, now we joke about it, but it's in these little things where I think we can make a difference simply by being curious.
Right.
And that is definitely something we train. And in general, the busier we are, the more assumptions we make, the less willing we are to actually listen to what the person is saying or is trying to say.
True.
Yes.
But it's also the understanding of how people work, right? Because where I came from, I'm just going to say it as how I experienced it. I had one colleague and she was pretty, they would say feisty, which I kind of hate, but feisty, but because whatever happened, she was asking questions. She was also someone who was both curious, but she also stood on her like 2 feet. And the thing was, whatever they asked her, like do this or explain that, she always was asking at least 1 or 2 questions back. What do you mean? Why are you asking me this? What do you need from me? And they really found it hard to deal with her.
Yeah, I can.
So did I, because I said, just fix this for me. I need this. Now that I'm older and a lot wiser, I think she was actually the only one that really, she never was misunderstood because she was always making sure that she understood the assignment or the question or whatever. If she got fake feedback, like you perform like a Messi or you look like a Ferrari, she would always ask, what do you mean? And why is that? And is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
Exactly, exactly.
But they really found it hard to deal with her. And the day that she left for a different position, everyone was relieved because work now became easy.
Because you all of a sudden have like-minded people.
Exactly, yeah.
And you basically cut out the one diverse, yes.
Exactly, yeah. And so we continued in this loop of not understanding each other. And so we basically went back to our own selves, which was not a good thing, to be honest. I really, afterwards, I miss her because she was keeping us on edge. And she was actually helping us understand each other. So we really misunderstood her, I think, at least most of us. But it means that if cultures need to change, they also need to change in how people work as a whole, like understanding different types of personalities and making sure that asking questions is not a bad thing. Giving feedback should be done by understanding how the other person works and then provide feedback that helps that specific person. But I think that's a difficult task, right? Because that's especially for companies that say, well, we've been doing this for 80 years, we're going to continue doing this. Is there a certain like mindset that really helps organizations to adapt this kind of working?
I guess it has to do with this being curious. I guess the easiest ways to explain it is by giving you an example. So I once supported this team that was completely Dutch, similar background, part of it was a part of a law firm, and they wanted more diversity.
Okay.
So they started with hiring an intern with a Muslim background.
Okay.
You would say great, right? It's a great start.
Yeah.
And indeed, it is great. Finally, good initiative. And then after a while, I asked him, so how is it going with the intern? And he said, yeah, she is great. But unfortunately, it's not really the same culture as we have, right? So every Friday afternoon, we have our company drinks, and she doesn't drink. So okay, of course, I don't know, of course she drinks something, but at least not
no alcohol. Yeah.
But and then leaves these company drinks way sooner than the Dutch people.
Yeah.
If I compare that to another example that I have of a company where a manager had a completely Dutch team with one Muslim girl who at some point was doing the Ramadan. And this manager said, I have no idea what it is exactly that you do. I mean, I know a little bit about it, but I want to know how it must be for you to work here and to not eat the whole day, eat or drink. So can I join you for a day?
Wow, okay.
Just as an experiment. So I'm giving you these two examples just to show that with something super tiny, you are changing the culture in a team.
Yeah.
So the question asks, are you trying to change a person and make them fit in a system that already exists? I think there are still many companies that will say, yeah, unfortunately, this is the way we work, black and white, male dominated.
Yep.
We have been doing this for 80 years. We're not going to change our drinks or whatever. And a company that says, well, actually, we do want to be open and we do want to have several backgrounds. So that means that sometimes we will change.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So it's really a matter of curiosity. I think it helps in general to have an external person because sometimes you are so stuck in your biases that you don't see them yourself.
Yep.
And it helps to have someone from the outside observing you and also giving you back what your team members think of you.
Exactly.
Yes.
I think the outside view is almost crucial for that.
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
Because it's obvious that you're blinded by your own company, right? It's not even at fault. It's just the way it works.
Yes.
And you need someone from the outside to pinpoint your blind spots. Yeah.
There's no good and bad.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's just logical. That's why we always say you need fresh eyes.
Exactly.
And yes, it helps to have someone who observes this or who can indeed ask this critical question.
Yeah.
Yes.
That makes sense. I've had the pleasure to work at a company that did the same thing. We worked with people from India, and they celebrate different holidays because they have, I think, multiple, not even gods, but deities, I think they call it. So they have multiple people that they worship in their culture, and they have different holidays. And one of the holidays, our company decided to offer the lunch from their own culture and own country.
Yes.
So what they did was they actually hired an external firm that is specialized in those types of food, and they had it delivered for lunch so that we can experience what celebrating that holiday feels like to them. So we could also understand why it's important to them, why they wanted to have the day off, because people were like mumbling like, oh, why are they off? Why do we need to work? And so because they did that, they basically transferred us into their culture. And it was really easy to understand why they did things the way they do, why they celebrate, what they eat. It was super interesting. And it also brought us closer together. But it was an external, someone who said, well, if you want to really connect these type of cultures, because it's different, India and the Netherlands is so vastly different, you need to really put them together rather than, introduce them and let them figure it out. So those external eyes really helped us to get closer together. And it improved the way we worked because it improved the relationships, it improved the understanding of each other. Also communicating with them when they were back abroad. It was so much easier back then. Yeah.
What a great initiative.
It was. Yeah.
Totally. This is a beautiful example, I think, of how understanding and learning from each other's cultures, or learning from the way you are
Yeah.
in general, is can be used even in business life.
Exactly.
Because sometimes we tend to make a differentiation between, the human being and the professional.
Right.
Oh man, I've heard so many times that they say, but that's not professional.
Yeah.
So if I am like treating you in a harsh way, then I am professional. It's the same thing, right? You're still a human being, so who wants to learn from another human being?
Exactly.
And that's what is happening, and it comes with indeed showing interest in the other person. It comes with vulnerability, it comes with curiosity, but indeed there has to be some sort of interest, or interest as in being interested in the other person.
Right.
Without that, it's going to be very hard.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah, you need to experience it, I think. Yeah,
Yes.
you need to live it. They did the same thing by sending me to Belgium. Because I worked in a commercial department, and we also used to work with Switzerland and Belgium and Italy, like I said in the conversation that we had before.
Yes.
And one of the things, there was a lot of difficulty between the Dutch and the Belgians, because a different hierarchy, different way of communicating. So I was sent to do a course on something about internally about the work that we do. I think it was like a product training, whatever. And they said, you're going to do the training. And I said, well, gladly. And they said, you're going to do it in Belgium. And you're going to stay there, you get a hotel, you get immersed into the Belgian culture, which meant that I had a warm lunch.
Nice.
That was so much better than having a sandwich. But also the nightlife, going out in Belgium, going to a restaurant, but also talking to the people outside of work. Because what I didn't understand at first, like I can do this in the Netherlands, I can, but they said it's not about the course or the training itself. After the course or the training, you're going to get invited by your colleagues to go out with them. They are no longer, like I said, professionals. Now they are human beings. Now you really get to understand who they are, what they stand for, what their background is, and why they do the things they do.
Exactly.
So you get to meet them on a personal level, because it was a busy job. So whenever we spoke online or on the phone, it was also always about work, because we're so busy. How are you? Good. Okay. And back to work. But now I was just sitting with them at a restaurant talking about life and sports and hobbies and whatever. So I really got to understand who they were on an individual level, which made working with them so much easier. Yes. Even if you made a mistake, you are far more forgiving than if you don't know that person. That's you need to be immersed in the culture, I think.
Yes, totally agree. And you see this especially in teams with a lot of different backgrounds,
yeah,
and different cultures, but actually understanding where the person comes from, and that doesn't necessarily only include cultures, but cultures. Even like here, I could ask you questions, and you will probably give me an answer that is not similar to mine about your background. So it's showing interest in the person, which helps me to understand what drives you, what makes you tick. And how I can basically work with you.
Yeah.
By also knowing your vulnerabilities, your insecurities, maybe personal issues. It helps. It helps to work better together. And I think that in general for leaders and in leadership is the message, like stay as close as possible to yourself and don't turn yourself into some sort of professional. Which comes from masculine behavior that we have once determined as being the correct leader.
Okay. Oh, and wow.
Yes.
Is that the standard for leadership? Is that?
Well, I think the definition of leadership should be redefined.
Okay.
That's basically what I really believe in. Also because of the time we live in, it's clear that we need some more situational leadership that is more flexible and that can adjust. Quicker than what we had so far, but yes, the typical masculine characteristics from stability, decisiveness, determination. I think we value them a little bit too much, and I do believe we undervalue some of the feminine characteristics like empathy, like collaboration, communication, like the girl who was asking you many questions.
Right, yeah.
So in the end, we need, whether they are men or women, that doesn't matter at all. As long as you develop both like sides of yourself, both characteristics, and you are able to use both of them, depending on the situation.
Sure.
That's how I would see leadership in the future.
I'm surprised by what you mentioned, that those are not already the definitions of being a leader, right? Being emphatic, being able to communicate, being able to understand the other person's perspective. That's what makes a good leader, in my view, but
Totally agree.
the standard is still different then.
Well, of course, I don't want to standardize this, and I don't want to say that this goes for all companies.
Of course.
That goes a bit too far, but I definitely think this is happening still a lot. And then there is a difference between actually developing these traits and learning them at a later age. So that's what I still see happening a lot, that some leaders know they have to be empathetic, but they are not really empathetic.
Right, okay.
Of course, this is, I think it requires a lot of self-reflection again, and in the end, leadership is personal development. So the more you develop as a person, the better leader you will be.
Right.
And I think we have recognized leaders who were good at their job by giving them these promotions, by making them top management, but not necessarily because they treat their colleagues in such a good way.
Yeah.
And I think that's the shift we are already making it. And I think already in our generation and the next generation, this will only get better. But it comes with a lot of consciousness about yourself.
Right.
Yes.
And something completely different, but it's a mandatory question on this show. We're talking about professionals and we're talking about human beings.
Yes.
What does it mean to you to be a human being?
Well, as I said, I really believe these two should be way closer to each other than they are right now. And I'm learning it myself. I also used to be a professional and a human being, two different things. But for me, a human being is recognizing that you are just like all the others, first of all, and recognizing that we are part of this bigger universe, and that in the end I want to be treated in a certain way, and that means that I need to treat other humans also in that same way. Basically the same way as I want to be treated. Right. Without sounding too biblical, but yes, so it comes with I guess doing things with kindness. That's it. Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah. Because if what you get is what you give, right, and vice versa.
Basically, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious, what does being human mean to you?
Wow, I never had that question back, to be honest. To me, being human means two things. First of all, being aware that the chance that you are a human being is very rare. So you're lucky to be one. I could have also been a ladybug or a mosquito.
Yes.
But it also means to figure out how you fit into this world, and what type of skills, what type of hobbies, what type of interest really suit you as a human being and what strengthen you. And I think to be a human being makes everyone is equal, but we're not all the same. And I think you need to figure out what makes you different and still equal, and what separates you from other humans in the sense of what is your strength, what is your personal interest, what is your personal characteristic.
Yes.
And I think what makes me a human being, like I said, is the fact that the one in the, I don't know how many chances to become a human being, but also the interest that I have and the position that I'm figuring out on this floating planet. I think that's what makes me a human. Yeah, and the fact that I have critical thinking, which is different than your critical thinking.
Yes, that's an important one. And then what makes you a professional?
Wow. For me, I've grown into it being the same.
Great.
Which was a difficult transition, but for me, I'm the same everywhere I go. My work is still I made my hobby into my work, which makes that a lot easier. But also, I speak on stage, and on stage, I'm also figuring out what is my position here. How can I inspire people? How can I learn from them? And how can their perspective change mine? So as a professional, I'm also looking at how can I be more emphatic? How can I add value? And how can I separate myself from other people as well without being someone else? That's why also, and this may sound weird, but if I have the opportunity to not stand on a stage, especially for smaller groups, I prefer that. Because I don't want to be lifted above the crowd.
Yes,
I want to be on the
literally.
same level, exactly. So I think what separates me as a professional from a human being, not that much. I think it's the same, you get the same ferry everywhere. I can be a bit more perfectionistic when I'm a professional. But I think that's all. Hopefully that's all, yeah.
Oh, I think you can be very, very happy with that. No, I mean, it's. I guess that's how you want life to be in general. To take the same ferry home as the same ferry that you bring to work.
It used to be different, though. It used to be completely different.
What was the difference?
As a professional, I was strict and I was trying to be the smartest and hardest working person in the room. And at home, I was relaxed and outgoing and fun and, people loving. So yeah, that was a big change to transition from, being the same everywhere. And being more human at the workplace, I think, was the biggest transition that I had to go through.
You no longer think you're the smartest person in the room.
Exactly. I think that everyone is smart, but in a different way. Exactly. Everyone has a different type of smart. And some have more in common with the type of smart that I have or the type of interest that I have. But everyone has either a different viewpoint or a different addition, or everyone has that special something that I don't have, that you don't have. And I'm always curious to learn about what that is. Like what makes you, like you said, what makes you tick? What makes you you? Why do you do the things that you do? Even if we have the same beliefs and the same perspectives, you can still approach it from different ways. That's why I like philosophy so much, because they also figured out that there's no such thing as truth. And this is going to the depth right now, but there's no such thing as truth. Because we can both look at this microphone and we can still see it in different ways and have different perspectives on it.
Yes. It might look different for you than for me.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, keep that in mind when looking at women in the workplace. I would say
exactly
that they all see the same thing, but look at it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And that all these perspectives are super valuable.
Exactly. That's what I mean with everyone's equal, but not everyone is the same.
Yes.
Because everyone brings a different perspective, and the female perspective is different and valuable in a different way, but equally valuable.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm sorry, I've got this thing in my throat the whole day. I've got the flu, I think. No, but I think that, again, the society would collapse without either.
Of course.
So why wouldn't companies?
No, I totally agree. There's just a difference in well, I think there's a difference between actually these human beings and their behaviors. Right. So let's separate even that. If this is too deep, you just let me know. But the same goes for men and women at work. Yep. So I'll give you an example. One other result that came out of the research was that women really struggle with their emotions at work. Mm-hmm. So in general, they try to avoid becoming emotional at work. Okay. Why? They all told me, there was nobody who disagreed, they all told me that they tried not to cry at work. Mm-hmm. So there's this sort of taboo on crying. Yeah. Well, if you look at why people cry, it's super interesting. I saw there was a difference between men and women. Okay. So men cry when they are really sad. Okay. Women cry when they are anxious, mm-hmm. when they are sad, or when they are angry. Okay. So can you imagine like two people being part of a meeting, one woman and one man, and one of them being angry and, well, smashing his wrist on the table and saying, "I'm so mad." And this woman next to him, who feels exactly the same, starts crying. Those are two different emotions that we interpret. Like actually, the base emotion is exactly the same, but the behavior is completely different. And the funny thing is that in the way the companies are structured right now, we tolerate one of the two more than the other one. Right. So that's where I say sometimes we are simply just humans with similar emotions, but still we express them in different ways. And that's where you get to the behavioral part. And that's exactly the part where I think we can still do some changes, because maybe we should just get used to women crying in the workplace.
It's a human emotion, right?
It's a human emotion. So if there is space for a fist, why is there no space for tears?
Yeah, but it makes sense, because my bias was automatically triggered. Thinking back of the work that I did, was smashing your fist on the desk is a power move. It feels strong, and
exactly.
Crying is a victim. Yeah, it's weak. It's a victim mentality.
Yes,
but it's the same emotion. But it's so embedded into our brains that one is different than the other one.
Yes.
It's so weird.
And we don't want to be perceived as weak, and that's why you get these women pretending to be not touched, not emotional, sometimes being called, I think you had a nice word for it earlier, but behaving like a man, let me put it that way, where in fact they are super emotional, but feel that there's no room to express them.
Right.
To express these emotions. So, yes.
You feisty.
Feisty.
Yeah, feisty. Yeah,
Thanks.
that was
feisty,
the
exactly. So basically, I've heard it many times that they say, okay, man, this is such a bitch. Why is it that women in business become so harsh and so bitchy or so feisty?
Yeah.
And I think it has to do with this part of not being completely safe or feeling safe. So the question is whether this comes because of the culture of the company or because of the person. Of course, we tend to say, this is just a personal issue.
Yeah.
Because that's the easiest answer.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. Yes. My best friend's mom, she's awesome, and she always says, if someone calls me a powerful woman, I just feel the urge to hit them, because then everyone else is not powerful. Or what makes me powerful? The fact that I kind of, do you think I'm masculine because I talk back? And so that's super interesting to see. And she really hates the term powerful women, because she says every woman is powerful. We just express it in different ways. But the more it resembles male leadership, the more powerful we think it is, which makes absolutely no sense.
If I wake you up in the middle of the night and I ask you to think of a leader,
right?
Who's the first person who comes up to your mind?
I think like a Malcolm X type of, someone who bumps his fist. And
exactly. So that's what you have to keep in mind when we think of leadership. Yeah. Because you asked me before if this is still the leadership we are dealing with.
Right.
And the fact that in your unconsciousness it's the first person you think about, I think that says enough.
Yeah. And
it goes for me too. I still think if you wake me up in the middle of the night, first of a man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunately still the standard.
And I'm not saying that we have to, against every bias, have to change this.
Of course.
But I am pretty sure that this is also like a historical fact. If you look at the last decades, and maybe in this country because of some Calvinistic heritage as well, that doesn't really help. But yes. This is definitely something that needs to change a lot quicker than it has been changing so far.
Yeah, and thankfully you are working on that.
Yes.
Is there, before we close, is there one final thought, one takeaway that you would like to share with everyone?
I think what is important to know, whether you are an employer or an employee, in the end you are working with humans. Whether they are indeed women or men. So look for allyships and don't look at them as if they are the other species that indeed starts crying and you don't know what's going on with them. Speak up and break these taboos. Ask how it is to be, I don't know, how somebody is feeling, and that's mentally, that's physically. There are so many themes there. We didn't talk about all the biological aspects of being a woman that you, of course, also bring into the workplace. Right. Because as we said, you are a human that you bring to the workplace. So from hormones to pregnancies, menopauses, all these things. Yep. That do make an impact on their human being and also on their performance in the end.
Yeah, for sure.
So talk about these things, but with genuine curiosity. And I guess the same for women. So it's definitely not a one-way street. It's working together, and I hope we will get some more female examples in the near future, because that will accelerate. I think this will turn towards a more balanced leadership.
Yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much again for being here. I think we need to do a part 2 somewhere down the line to go into the depth of the biology of male and female. But for now, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope the listeners enjoyed it. I'm sure they did.